Thank you, Wanda, for joining me again for this studio visit. I really appreciate your time and your additional time, so thank you.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Would you go ahead and give us a little intro on your work and the themes that you pursue?
Sure. The things that I'm most interested in are kind of interrogating notions of Latinx identity, Afro-Latinx identity, what that means, like in the United States, kind of in that landscape. And also interrogating, anti-Blackness within the Latino community as well as in, American community. So there's two really big overarching themes. And then what we see in the bulk of my work is also activating, kind of turning my anxieties into archetypes and activating those things as real people.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the way you make a superhero, right?
Right.
They've got strengths and weaknesses, and so I kind of done something like that with these kind of archetypes in my work as a way of examining those anxieties and working them out, just at least at the very least trying to understand them, and then presenting them for the viewer to kind of maybe to see themselves or maybe identify in the work somehow.
And the archetypes that you're creating, those are the performances that you are doing out in spaces and
Mm-hmm.
the YouTube as well?
Yep. Yeah. So the Reina series specifically is the one that's dealing with the anxieties. But then, the Chuleta stuff is dealing with issues of like urbanism. It's kind of an urban futurism.
Okay.
But this idea of interrogating notions of the art world and Blackness in the art world, Latinidad in the art world, that kind of the fickleness of the art world, and so it's kind of anchored as like critiquing the art world, but also critiquing us,
Mm-hmm.
the Latino community. This kind of, and I'm all about social critique and institutional critique in my practice. So.
Looking at both sides of the coin.
Yeah, I think that in this, and we spoke about this before.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a conduit because I feel like I'm in this place where I can speak to both sides. I feel like I understand, academia, coming through academia very, very well, very much aware of my being first generation in college, first generation in the art world, right? Coming up the ranks all the way through academia, and then now being on the inside, and it's a big deal. I'm not saying I'm the only one in my family, but it is also that first generation. My mom from Puerto Rico, and then we're the first gen here.
Mm-hmm.
So, I definitely didn't know that I was going to come this far up the ranks, that I would then be in the ivory tower. I had no idea that was going to happen, and so I feel like I'm in this position where I can speak to both sides, and so I can translate for both sides, but I can also critique both sides. So,
Living in both worlds.
yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where you said you started your work too, when you were first making murals and looking up to the muralists in your community as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it definitely came up in that, admiring the muralists in the neighborhood. And my closest, I don't want to say that my closest contact to art was only in the murals, but I guess in some sort of way that's truthful because that the street murals I passed them by every day, and I was going to like art high school and but you saw what I saw on the street and what I saw in art school were very different things, but what I was closest to, the most immediate thing that was in front of me were the rest in peace murals and graffiteros and like just kind of tagging and stuff like that. And so that was always something that really excited me. And also the other contact, which I didn't mention the last time, was my deep love for fashion illustration, right? The Lord and Taylor magazines, and just, I love my fashion plates so much. And so these are the things that really kind of anchored my early practice. And so looking at the murals, and then looking at and then fashion illustration and comics. And so as I came into my own, you can see that in the early works, that kind of the kind of comic inspired murals, but they're like fashion bags.
Yeah, everything merged together
Yeah.
and reinterpreted as that conduit. That's really cool.
But taking the comics out of the page and onto a mural. So
Yes.
yeah, in the street,
Mm-hmm.
which is fun.
And then even being able to perform them later as your reinas.
Yeah. And I think that at the end of the day, whenever people ask me about what my practice is, while I'm anchored in the visual arts, I always see myself as a storyteller, and the materials just move and change to facilitate the story. What is it that I'm trying to convey to the viewer? And not necessarily tie it up in a neat bow, but more lay it out, and then the viewer's interpretation kind of extends that narrative. And I'm really excited about that. I think that's why I like performance so much, because you kind of just set the scene, but you don't know how, at least for me, I don't exactly know how or when it's going to end.
So it's very fluid then too.
Yeah, I really like that a whole bunch. I think even when I go into my murals, like I might have a vague idea of what I want to do, but I don't really know what's going to happen until I get in front of the wall. Which is why you don't see any of my murals in this town, because they want to see full laid out things, and I don't work that way.
I just feel like you gotta trust me.
Yeah, I did that actually. When I did that, I was in the S-Files exhibition for Museo del Barrio in 2005. But we tried everything in terms of layout and stuff, and where it was going to go and what wall, and nothing was really working. And then I just showed up one day. They told me, this is the wall you're going to do, and it was like a 50-footer. It was huge. And I looked at it. Okay, and I just decided I was going to treat it with the same way I treat watercolor. So it's like you wet the wall, and then I just let color drip and work. And I did that here at the museum, at the Orlando Museum, for that big mural.
Yes.
I looked at it, I was like, yeah, mural goes here. I don't know why, but that's the inspiration. The same thing in El Salvador. I did the same thing. The fun thing when I got to El Museo de Puerto Rico in Santurce, when that show traveled, I just looked at the place. I was like, no, that's not when it happened. It was at El Museo, and Rocio Aranda was the curator at the time. And we tried everything, and I just looked at her, I said, you trust me? She goes, yeah, all right, cool. I just went to town. It was like a 50-foot piece of paper. It was awesome.
That's fantastic. Sometimes you have to give that trust. You know your work, and you know your style and everything that goes into it, and the thought. So
yeah, it's hard to plan. For me, it's hard. I like the unpredictability. I like the uncertainty. There's something that's exciting about it. Is it really kind of keeps you connected to the medium. You're not really sure exactly what's going to happen, but you're there. It's like, well, I don't really know what's going to go down, but I'm here for it.
Yeah.
So
is it kind of like a meditative practice too, as you're working through it and working with your materials?
Yeah, I would say. You have to really be listening. You have to be watching for happy accidents. I didn't think that this was going to turn out this way, but you know what? I've been thinking about this too much, and it's been spinning around too much in my head. I feel like when I am noodling around an idea too much, it's not that it's me second guessing my instincts, and then I was like, you know what? Just go. It's always going to work. You know what I mean? Because I think the nice thing about not having a plan is that nobody knows when you screwed up. So it's like cooking without a recipe, like, whoa. If the cake tastes great, then I made it. If it tastes bad, then my husband made it. It's fun though.
But that's your background and your experience brings you up to that spot or that year.
Yeah. I had a teacher in undergrad at FIT, Melanie Green. And she would say to us, if anybody asks you how long it took that drawing, especially if you did it really fast, you just tell them your age. 45 years to make that drawing in 15 minutes. So.
Yeah. All of that background.
Yeah.
It helps. It makes such a huge difference. So, what kind of pieces are you currently working on? Sneak peek, sort of in here.
Sneak peek. So I'm really excited about this work. I kind of came into studio with one idea. I was trying to figure out how to do more queens, more performance, and this was when, a simpler time. 2019.
Pre-COVID.
2019, super days. Oh my gosh, I was thinking about performance, I was thinking about creating new queens, etc., etc. But something kept telling me that what I needed was sanctuary. I just needed to be away. I needed to kind of reconnect with my voice. I needed to, reestablish a solid practice instead of doing things piecemeal. I think, and maybe piecemeal is not the best way to describe it, but it's more like, because you're teaching full time and you're working with my little one, and it's just a lot, right? You're shuttling here, there, and so, you end up working on one big project for over the time, over the span of a year, because that's the best you can. I didn't feel like I had the space to practice. And my sabbatical year gave me a real luxurious time to kind of come, be in the space, tool around with stuff, and that's what I was really hoping for. And so I was thinking a lot about sanctuary and just needing a place to kind of practice and reconnect with my voice as an artist, right? And it had been a really long time. I mean, we're talking 20 years since I'd had just time to make stuff, really make stuff, just without not having to go to work or anything else, just time to make stuff. And it brought me back to this place of my hair. I had this moment when I realized that hair was the central character in all of my works, from the Chuleta character with her hair in the doobie wrap, to the Reinas Queens with this really big hair. Even really, really early works, in 2004, I did a performance in my home studio where I had made a really long braid and I tethered myself to a pillar and I kept trying to walk, and it would yank me back and walk and yank me back. So I think I found myself, not wanted to because it was inadvertent how it occurred, but I found myself really just allowing myself to enjoy the process of drawing braids, being around braids, and then ultimately making sculptures with the braids. The sculpture started out as still lifes for my drawings, but then they took a life of their own. And now I feel like once I realized that my wigs and everything were a central character and not just a happenstance thing, I had a sixth sense moment when I was in the studio fussing with my prints, and then I'm like, oh my God, I've been doing braids for the last 20 years, and oh my God, I didn't realize I've been doing this whole time. And so once that piece clicked, and then the Rona happened, right? Coronavirus happened, and then social unrest happened, and I find myself thinking a lot about how nature can't be contained. And what we're looking at is what happens when you try to dominate nature, and it refuses to be held anymore. And I'm thinking a lot about what we see in gardening, right? You try to tamp down the bugs, you're constantly chasing the weeds back, things are gonna do what they're gonna do, right? And I had my personal wake-up call with planting the right things at the wrong season, at the beginning of the rainy season in Florida, and everything was blooming so beautifully, and then it all went to hell, chasing caterpillars, coming, pulling a handful of frass out of my corn, and just having my garden ravaged. And I was determined to do it organically. I could have just easily thrown some product on it, but I didn't want that. I want to make sure that the stuff is wholesome. And I realized that in order to have that wholesome kind of peaceful experience, you have to make peace with what happens with nature. You have to be supple and pliable, and you have to commune with nature, not fight it, right? Because it's going to win. Nature's going to win. It's going to do what it's going to do. All right, you want to fight me one way? We're just going to wilt. We're just going to die right on you. Or, you know what? You got the caterpillars down, but you're going to get blight. Guess what? You know what I mean? Or you're going to get a crazy fungus because it hasn't stopped raining in 5 days and just everything's waterlogged. Either way,
some new form of life is going to come up and rise through.
Yeah, and I've come up and my corn looks like shit, but I got tons of mushrooms that I can't eat, right? So, and I just found it really funny. Those 3 pieces of corn that are actually edible must have cost me $150 between the soil amendments and the hours and hours of sweat that I put out there, the mosquito bites that I got, all of that. And I think I got 3 pieces of edible corn. Everything else just went to shit. And I didn't even get to cook a single zucchini. There were so many beautiful ones, and then when I went to go pick one, it just melted because it was rotted from the. It's just a mess. But that's it's a humbling experience. Like you think you can just show up and start throwing things in the ground, when there's something that has been there all along, and it has a rhythm, and it has a rhythm, and it knows what it's supposed to do, and it knows what it's supposed to be, and you just showed up, and you think you're gonna force us to do. Because you decided? Why? Because you got some money and a shovel? Well, watch. And, I think for me it's an interesting metaphor. We're looking at humans, trying to hurt humans. They've been hurting humans for the longest centuries, trying to force people to do only certain things. You only belong this place. We allowed you. You're lucky that. And look at what you've gotten. And we gave this to you. And what more do you want? Like, wait a minute. Wait, hold up. You think that there wasn't going to be an uprising?
Right.
You think people weren't going to be like, you know what, I'm tired of this shit. and this one of my favorite movies of all time. It's called The Bronx Tale. Because one of the characters, Chaz Palminteri, has a conversation with the young boy who's the lead, and it's more important to be respected or feared, right? And the character someone's gonna watch this and go and look it up and tell me how wrong I am. So whatever, I'm paraphrasing.
Interpretation.
But essentially, the character is basically saying that fear can be overcome. At some point, you can be a fearful mobster, and you can terrorize generations. But eventually that can be overcome. Yeah. And that gives them a rage, and someone's going to stand up. And we're witnessing that right now. And all that to say that my wigs don't need me anymore.
So you're taking the wigs off.
They're rising up. They're doing whatever they want to do. And I feel like it happened very organically in experimentation. That I was looking at the trees outside in my yard, and I'm looking at the trees, and I've always felt very melancholy with the trees in the city, and anywhere in the South, I always feel very. Not to say that the North doesn't have like a sad history with trees, but
the South is very difficult.
The South is very difficult, and coming upon these big, beautiful old trees, like I see them, and I always wonder, like, what have you seen? And I. As I walk down, especially these beautiful old trees down here, actually in front of the Mennello, good Lord. I looked at that tree and I wondered, and I'm going, my God, what have you seen? Yeah. What have you seen? And like the trees are like these impartial witnesses to the history, and if we don't like an area, we want to tear down nature and throw up that sound like Joni Mitchell, right?
Parking lot.
But a parking lot, right? Yeah. So, I think I went on a tirade the last time we talked about how I was like, okay, we could either get the community together and have a really big lot, or 2 or 3, or just kind of just share in agriculture. Like, this is what we should be doing. The land and the weather is perfect for it. Why? So you're gonna tell me it's easier for you to clear out a lot that could be easily, you're gonna clear out nature to put up a health food store, like Whole Foods? Are you serious? Like, don't get me wrong, I will go to Whole Foods, right? But
sure, but the idea of the community coming together and everyone working towards this goal to feed
each other, like why wouldn't you? Like this is like, and then the woman who runs a residency where I was at this spring was like, this is all part of the machine. Like, you have to, there's a reason why you have, like, how does she say it? I'm gonna mess it up too, but essentially you move to a house, you have property that you're not allowed to grow on, and which means you have to work. Now you and your husband have to work, you and your partner have to work. So you can go buy food when you're sitting on the thing, you can just go grow your food. But if you do that, then you don't need the supermarket so much.
Right.
So that's like really like, I'd never thought about it before. Growing up an urban girl, like having a lawn is like a nice thing, but I'm like, I came back like Charlton Heston came down the mountain in 10 Commandments.
Yes.
A crazy look in his eye, a white streak in his hair, like, I know what to do. And I started putting things in the ground, and the ground said, Yeah, okay, try.
Maybe next time.
Yeah, try again. Like, and now I'm late. Like, I should have been putting this in the ground now, but I'm late.
It's so interesting.
Totally
That's the metaphor too. We were talking about, you know, your expertise as an artist and being able to follow that, and even without plans, and you went into gardening that way. So eventually, in 45 years, you'll be able to without anything.
Yeah, but maybe in the woods. And I think that it will be nice with mentorship. Like, it'll be a little bit easier with mentorship. And not to say that there isn't out there, right? But that's what we should be leaning towards, and we don't. Like, it's like everybody wants to be an island unto themselves, and they get in their car, they go to the mall, they have their friends through the internet, but they don't want to sit and talk with each other. It's this normal is not normal. Nothing about it is normal at all. And I hate to sound like one of those crotchety old ladies, wow, back in my day, but there is something really tragic that we've come so far that we can't even fathom. We can't even fathom just coming outside and say hello to our neighbor, or, hey, I've got a bushel of peppers. Like, my pepper plant is going crazy. I'll trade, if you've got something. Or, hey, come on over. Like, I really got to turn this soil. Like, it would be great to have extra. And I got beer or this or that. And, but we don't do that. And I thought about actually what set this in motion also was in Puerto Rico after Maria. People one day they were on their cell phones, driving their cars, shopping online. Next thing you know, they're thrown back 150 years. Yeah. No electricity, no water. And how the hell do you do this? With no ancestral knowledge, or very little ancestral knowledge left. Yeah. And I remember the stories that my mother would tell me, that she used to wash her clothes in the quebrada, in the brook. And she talked to me about how, she's told me about it, but I don't know how to do it. I feel like I should ask her how to do it. Just, she's older, she's 88. I should probably ask her before something happens and I am left without, she's a font of knowledge, right? So using coconuts as plates, as bowls, how to just hollow out certain, and use the husk and crack it a certain way, or using the ash that they cooked on as bleach. Yeah. Right? I'm like, what are you talking about? And then you see in the supermarket, in the whole section, right? Activated charcoal toothpaste. I'm like, wow, that's so normal. It's black and my teeth are going to be... My mom bleached her shit in the 40s this way with ash and charcoal. This is what she was talking about this whole time. My mother did not know how to read those years and years. So, so the ancestral knowledge is lost. Like, we could benefit from that, and we don't have it. So all of that to say, my wigs don't need me. And I'm just really delighted to let them be. I feel like right now is not the time for me to force them to serve me. Like, I just have to listen.
It's seeming to me a lot like a social ecosystem that you're kind of looking at.
Yeah, all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why you need the trees.
I try. Every now and then. Yeah. So, is there anything else that you would really like to go into about the braiding, about your work in general? We can talk about.
I'm really excited about this place where I'm in right now, because I don't feel like it's laden with the expectation or like big wow factor. You know what I mean? That I have to be in it. Like, I think I'm kind of enjoying the fact that I don't want to be the center of the attention in that sense. Like, where if I'm not walking down the street in a 45-pound dress, or if I'm not sitting, with a 6-foot train holding people, and I think for me this is kind of an act of self-preservation to be here right now. I don't feel safe enough, or whole enough to step out into the world and be vulnerable again. I'm terrified of the state of things right now. Right, I feel like certain parties would feel a lot more emboldened to enact some kind of intervention, or some kind of psychological or physical violence if I were to stage a public, thing right now. Right. In my 20s, I had cojones for days. And it's not about having cojones for, it's more like I'm older. Like, I'm older. This is not that I don't want to fight. That's not it at all. I feel like there's a different way to fight.
Right.
You know, I feel like there's the stand outside in the freezing rain or stand outside in the sweltering heat, do that thing. That there are folks that do that,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's the folks like me that will just chat.
Everyone's got their part to play too.
Yeah,
To show up for it.
Yeah, we can chat. I can show you my braids. I can, you know, let's talk about oppression. Let's talk about what happens when you try to squeeze something and it doesn't fit and it doesn't. You know, like I'm using expanding foam.
Mm-hmm.
I did it for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's unpredictable. It's squirrely as shit, and I put these bindings up, and it just. I wanted to see what would happen if I wanted to watch it expand. I wanted to watch it bleed and ooze and congeal, you know, and I wanted to echo that bulging binding thing, like some of the stuff that I saw in my garden when I was messing around with the
decay.
With the decay,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God! Specifically the coils in the corn stalks. Like I'd never grown corn before, so I was just happy she was coming out the ground. Like, yeah, you grew some. This urban girl just grew some out of corn, right?
It's coming.
Yeah. And then I was fast. I would love to go out really early in the morning and watch the coil. Right, just look at the way the corn grows. It's really pretty tight little thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden I'm looking at the leaves and looking crazy. So like, no, you just gotta open the spiral.
Oh.
The caterpillars are tiny, but they will destroy your crop. You gotta get in there. So I'm like, okay, how do I get in there and not destroy the spiral, right? Because I'm thinking about the sacred geometry of nature, right? Like it does this for a reason, because that structure will hold this stalk and these things come out of it. So I was doing this knowing that I was disrupting the sculpture, right?
Mhm.
This natural thing. And I'm like, I don't know how to do this without breaking the pattern. And then, you know, is it more important for me to keep the spiral or keep the plant without putting harmful chemicals in? So I had to, it was definitely an experiment.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm picking out caterpillars. Oh my God, picking up caterpillars. And then I'm seeing what happens when the spiral is interrupted. And then you see like this strange growing pattern. But it's still growing,
Mm-hmm.
but these things are happening and it's getting limp in certain places, or things are bulging. And when the corn would grow on those damaged things, they were still growing, but instead of growing nice and strong, they were like curved, weirdly. They were deformed, but they tried so hard. They
Mhm.
really did. And I remember having a lot of empathy for these poor little corn, you know, little ears of corn that were trying so hard to grow,
Mm-hmm.
even though my hand is what stopped them. But either way, like, you know what I mean? And so I felt really guilty because I was
Right.
like, I'm tampering with nature. And so I wanted to echo that, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course I like rhinestones. There's rhinestones in everything I do. I don't know why. Maybe I was Liberace in another life. Look at rhinestones and gold leaf. I don't know why. So gaudy.
Well, I think, you know, we were talking earlier about the kind of grotesque nature possibly of it, but then it's also reminiscent of still lifes, of fruit, and of rotting fruit.
Yes.
So like you get this luscious idea, but then so you get the gold and the diamonds, but then you have the decay that goes along with it.
Yeah, so like this one, for example, there's some areas that, like, they were all, because I couldn't be here in this sort of safe space for my sculptures, I had to leave. I was working out of my Florida room.
Mm-hmm.
My Florida room, my son's so bushy. I was screened in Portsmouth, but whatever. Is that what they call the Florida room?
Yeah, it's a Florida room.
So where I worked out there until the heat was just unbearable. And, you know, hand gold leafing, all this stuff. So it's really tedious. So it's really very grotesque. There's a lot of accidents, but there's also like a sense of tedium. And I'm like, I'm going to gold leaf all of this spray foam, like low, high, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to spend all this time on this really crummy, unstable material.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to leave it out on my back porch, you know, so it's exposed to the heat, the sun, humidity. And it started crackling and get all funky and get
Mhm.
really like tarnished. And I loved it. I loved how funky and gross it looked. So then I brought them back here and I was like trying to manage it, right? And then so I started using that decay as a color palette. Like, okay, the older, the newer, the gold leaf, I was introduced to expanding foam, which is another squirrely material that
Mm-hmm.
in the experienced hands
Mm-hmm.
works great. I'm not that person.
Not
So
yet.
weird shit happened, but I love it. I friggin' love it. Like this thing that looks like a octopus on top.
Mm-hmm.
It started seizing up in the jar. And it came out the shape of the jar. But I loved it. I love the unpredictability of it. I love that I had to be really present
Mm-hmm.
and move really fast.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something exciting about having to learn the recipe. And I suck at following recipes to tea. I'm more of a guidelines chick. So I'm like, I don't know, that looks about like it's just
A little bit too much.
yeah, a little bit too much and not enough. But
It kind of balances too
Yeah.
the perfection of the hair braids as well. Like there's something so, you know, they're very complex. They're very complex and they're very braided and managed, right? And it's that idea of managing your hair for others.
yeah. You know, so I can't take credit for the actual beauty and precision of the braids. Those come like that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
I wouldn't want everybody to think that I'm sitting here making these fabulous braids because why don't you have a beauty shop? No, and anybody that knows that you buy them this way.
Right.
But one of the really other fun thing about this is that I asked people to send me their used braids,
Mm-hmm.
the used extensions, and some folks are like, you work it, that on somebody's head. I'm like, but I like the history. I like that these belong to people. They didn't just have to come out of pristine packages, but they belong to someone. There's someone who's walking around feeling themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and it's something very intimate about holding hair, right? And especially someone else's, and so that was they started. I had these ideas that these were going to be portraits of people,
Mm-hmm.
and they kind of are, but it's like an amalgam. It's more like a portrait of a community.
Yeah.
You know.
Absolutely. That built up community of positives and things that are difficult, but that we could all work through. And
Yeah, and then I like the erosion. I'm not trying to hide the bindings. I'm not interested in showing you something that's been perfected. I want you to see the chicken wire. I want you to see the understructure. I want you to see the drips, where things tarnish, where things didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes for a good sculpture, but it makes for a damn good story.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Makes for a beautiful speaking piece to talk to. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and for inviting me into your studio.
No, thank you for inviting me to be part of this. This is really nice.
Very happy to have you. Thank you.
Anytime you need, whenever you need.
Of course.